I have to admit, Manny Diaz makes a lot of sense here to Duke. And I've got a long list of reasons. I'm going to condense them here. Diaz is familiar with North Carolina. I'll start that. Familiarity is important. He coached at NC State, North Carolina State with the Wolfpack from 2000 to 2005 as a defensive assistant. So he doesn't necessarily have any ties to Duke. However, he spent time in North Carolina, so he understands. Now, the recruiting landscape is obviously a lot different than what it was in the very early 2000s compared to 2023 going into 2024. But when you think about it, spending 5 years, half a decade with one program, and where you started your college football coaching career, NC State, it kind of makes sense if Duke, being in Durham, North Carolina, would make sense here for Manny Diaz. And the second reason is Duke is a respectable football program. I get it. Basketball school, totally understand the legacy of Mike Krzyzewski, but Duke has shown that it can win with a capable head football coach in Mike Elko. You need the right guy, the right system. The ACC, competitive, Power 5, and they just expanded, right? They just added new schools. So not exactly top tier, but a solid spot. And remember, Manny Diaz was the head coach at Miami of Florida, an ACC school. So that was, I already teased it, but Duke, my third reason is Duke can succeed with the right coach. So there isn't this. I want to bring up Matt Rule's comments, Nebraska head coach, a former Penn State assistant coach, coached in the NFL, right? Played at Penn State. Matt Rule said that he is all for his coordinators, his assistant coaches, taking on certain jobs. He wants them to benefit, to level up and go on to the next step in their careers. However, go to the right program where you're going to get the right support. Duke, again, has shown that it can succeed. You don't want to go to a place where you have no chance of success and it hurts your resume. This could really help Manny Diaz in this case if he wants to again move up, because I can't imagine that he's going to stay in the ACC for the next decade. I can only think that he either wants to become a Big Ten head coach or an SEC head coach, because remember, the bar was set with Miami of Florida. Miami of Florida, in terms of a program, I'm not talking about in terms of wins and losses, but that is a program where you have a lot of the resources, a lot of the media attention, a place to go get as much talent and bring in and interest talent as much as you can. Duke, compared to that, is slightly a step backwards. However, we know that Manny Diaz isn't going to take something like Louisiana Tech, for example, okay? A Group 5. He's not going to take any Group 5 jobs. So Duke is a respectable football program in that regard, even though basketball takes precedence. Another reason, Duke can outbid Penn State. And it has nothing to do with the resources. Penn State, how much do you want to pay your coordinators in comparison to what a head coach would make? Well, let's look at the numbers. This is the evidence, right? I don't know what Manny Diaz's salary is, so I'm going to have to give an estimate based on what we do know. But I imagine it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 million, maybe $2.5 million. You could speculate $3 million, but I feel like that would be, now that's something that maybe they're targeting this time around. But I imagine that it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 million. That's a lot of money. I know it is. Brent Pry's salary, from what we know before he took the Virginia Tech job, was reported at $1.8 million before he left. Now, what did Mike Elko make at Duke? He made $3.5 million. Well, do some basic math. $3.5 million is more than $2 to $2.5 million in the case of what we expect. We anticipate what Manny Diaz is making. $1 million is $1 million, right? That is, it's like, okay, well, he's going from 2 to 3. That can't be no. You're going from 1 million to another million, right? So that is a lot of change. I could be wrong about this as far as what Manny Diaz makes. Maybe he does make 3 to 3.5 million, because as we know, Pat Kraft and what James Franklin has led us to believe with his nuances in the press conferences is that the staff and everybody is aligned, meaning that not everyone's not afraid to break out the checkbooks anymore. So I have a hunch that Pat Kraft might pay a little better than Sandy Barber based on the Mike Rose hiring, the Micah Shrewsbury contract offer, and everything else, and what James Franklin has said. So Duke, because it's a head coaching spot compared to a defensive coordinator spot, Duke might realize that they might need to end this with the conference expanding, media rights changing. There's more money available. Instead of paying a Mike Elko 3.5 million, they might say, "Hey, Manny Diaz, we could pay you four, maybe $4.5 million, and that would Duke can get into a bidding war with Penn State. Let's just put it that way, regardless of what the number is. And Duke could ultimately win just because of the prestige of the head coaching spot compared to a coordinator. It's right back in the ACC. Already mentioned that and goes along with the theme of familiarity. Manny Diaz knows what it takes to coach in the ACC. He knows the competition. He knows the recruiting. He knows the landscape. Sure, it's expanding. You're getting other schools, but that's not to say that, well, Manny Diaz doesn't know that. Manny Diaz doesn't understand how the conference realignment changes everything. He's coached at Miami. He just gets all of it. There isn't going to be these uncharted waters for Diaz if he decides to take the Duke head coaching job. And this is also a second chance to prove himself, right? I think bottom line is, from my point of view, he was unjustly run out of Miami. I don't the way that things that happened, the way that things went down, and we'll never know the full story, but it was wrong, regardless of how you want to look at it. It wasn't he wasn't justly duly fired. It was almost taken away from him. Half the board wanted to keep him, half the board wanted him to go and never return. It was just weird circumstances. So this Manny Diaz wants to be a head coach again. This is his opportunity to prove himself at a respectable spot, even though it might be slightly beneath Miami and that bar. The final reason I have here why Duke makes sense if Manny Diaz is going to be interested is Duke does like defensive-minded coaches. We've seen that they have a clear-cut identity. You bring in Mike Elko, who has the defensive background, defensive resume, coached at Texas A&M in the SEC as the defensive coordinator under Jimbo Fisher. Manny Diaz does make sense in that regard. There's smoke here. There is, even though there aren't official reports. Manny Diaz is down in Durham right now as we speak, or he's down he's down at Durham right now as we speak, and he's meeting with the Duke executives and he's negotiating a contract offer. It's not like that at all. But his name being linked with the Blue Devils, there's smoke here, and I certainly think it could lead to fire. Now that pun was intentional, since I realized what I said in the beginning of the episode, right? How can Penn State counter? If Duke is serious about this and believes that Manny Diaz is a legitimate head coaching candidate for them, how can Penn State counter? With a raise? Like that needs to be said. Manny Diaz, if we're assuming that he makes 2 to 2.5 million, with the Big Ten contract and the media rights, Penn State now gets $100 million from that media rights deal. You mean to tell me there's not a little bit of money in there, maybe a 500 grand, $1 million to keep Manny Diaz around for maybe one or two more seasons here? A raise is how you keep you outbid Duke. You do that. If Duke's going to offer 3.5 million to Manny Diaz, offer the same, and then sell him on the fact of consistency, that you've been here. You don't have to uproot your family again and take them to a new area. You're going into your third year, right? You found a niche here with Penn State, but sell Diaz on the fact that a playoff run, you don't have to settle. It depends on how Manny Diaz views this. If he really wants to get back into head coaching and believes that a Power 5 job is good enough no matter what the Power 5 job is, then fine. I understand that reasoning. But what about other spots in the Big Ten? Because we've seen what resources that Michigan State will commit to a head coach, whether it's Mel Tucker, whether it's Jonathan Smith from Oregon State, right? Sell Diaz on the fact that you could have an embarrassment of riches, an embarrassment of options if you stay and go through a potential college football playoff run. I mean, Manny Diaz has shown as an individual what he can do with the defense, but then how about turning a program into a 10-2 team to now taking them to the expanded college football playoff and ultimately, hopefully, winning a game, making it to the semifinal, and then who knows what else? Because Penn State right now, its roster is set up for success in 2024. Does Manny Diaz think that taking the risk there, getting a raise from Penn State, can help him land an even bigger job, a better program that's going to be even more committed to football success in the future if he bides his time? Duke is not all in on football. I think you got to make that apparent. It's a basketball school first. Yes, they don't ignore football, but you know what's what with the Blue Devils. You really do. Is this Manny Diaz's best opportunity that he's receiving to succeed? Personally, I don't think so. but I don't know how he views the situation as being a head coach versus being not one. Technically, no. I don't think that he has the best opportunity here to succeed just because Duke isn't all in on football. They care about it, but they seem a little more interested in basketball. That's just my opinion. So, in short, Manny Diaz to Duke is a legitimate possibility for all of those reasons. Let me know in the comments if you think so as well, or if there are any other reasons that you are led to believe that he'll go to Duke or he'll stay at Penn State.